Hello, NPL fans, and welcome back to season 7 of the NPL. And today we've got the first of our power ranking series. So we will start off with a post-draft power rankings. If you don't know what that means, this means that we won't go over the teams or just the matches. No, this is before all the matches have happened. We will just go over all the drafts and analyze the drafts and make our power rankings based solely on the draft, so not about the players. So we know probably all the players, but still we only rank their drafts, how they drafted and how we see their drafts, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses. But first of all, let me introduce my co-host, which is not the Vert this season because he is now in the majors, but it's Turbo, a well-respected coach among a lot of different leagues actually. Turbo, introduce yourself.
Hey, yo guys, it's Toa, and I'm happy to be fulfilling big boots in the Verd. We are going to be getting on with some major power rankings. You might have recognized me from the minus power rankings last season, but I got the upgrade thanks to the Jolt who gave me the position. So really excited to get started with a good set of power rankings that, interestingly, me and Phalop have not agreed on a single spot, but that's the nature of post draft power rankings.
Yeah, so we will just go over the power ranking shortly. So as Turbo mentioned, we have not have a single team at the same spot, which is quite amazing feat. But also just everyone drafted quite well, and all teams have some weaknesses, some strengths, and maybe I see some weaknesses that I think are like key weaknesses, and that's why I rate a few teams a bit lower. But maybe Turbo saw it a little bit differently, and his preference is to in a different department, and that's why the team is a bit higher. So probably all the teams are around the same, some a bit better than others, of course. But as you know, this is all just totally opinionated. So if you have a whole different view on rankings, just post your own rankings in the comments below. We always enjoy some healthy discussion about why we put our teams at the spots we did and why you would put them at another spot, and that's always amazing to do. So definitely feel free and don't just do it and happily interact with us. So let's just first get started. So at number 16, Turbo, you have the Reggie Giants. So can you tell me why you have them at the bare bottom?
As much as Merck is not going to like me for this, I'm not a huge fan of the team. Although he's got some great individual mons in itself, like Mega Guardwire is an extreme threat and a great first round pick on his part. And there's also Dragonite Z, one of a very, very good Z user in the game, which has a lot of coverage and a lot of really strong Z moves, including stuff like Z Hurricane, Z Outrage, a really great utility move to just throw on and nuke Mon. He's also got Lucario, which he finished in the GPC as a highest kill leader when he won it, which is a really good feat for Lucario. So we know Merc can use it. And one of the best defoggers in the game being Zapdos because of the coverage it has and the versatility it has. Rocks, he has an interesting weakness to Rocks where Zapdos, one of his defoggers, doesn't appreciate Rocks. Dragonite has multi-scale, which doesn't appreciate Rocks either. Talonflame, he's got a Talonflame, which is a quad weakness to Rocks. Gligar, another one of his defoggers, doesn't resist Rock, even though it has the ground typing. It's also flying. And Kabutops, as a Rock type, also doesn't resist Rock. So his Rock resist is Lucario, which is 4 times. But Lucario, you don't want to be running as a wall to stop Rock types. And then I don't think he has a Gastrodon, and then admittedly, Gastrodon is fat as anything, but I think offensive Rock could be a real big problem to his team. Also, I think that Mega Gardevoir plus Dragonite, although it's a good two offensive or special break, no, one special breaker and one is sort of more offensive, but also could be a special breaker. They don't synergize as well as perhaps more intertwined like a Mega Latios and a Zoom Rule core, which we'll get to later. I think they just sort of stick together. He's got a few nice stealth rockers in Miltank, and Gastrodon doesn't get stealth rocks. I think Kabutops gets stealth rocks and Gligar does too. So he has nice offensive rocks, although his removal isn't great. With a spinner being Kabutops, that's not really good as well. Celebi's kind of just there. I think Merc won't enjoy using Celebi because it's a bit bland and a bit difficult to use. I think Drapion is a mon that he would get on well with, but otherwise, I think the offensive weakness, the rock offensive rockness is a big problem for him, and he'll find that out when teams face him.
Okay, that's all fair. Like I have him a little bit higher up, so as you can see, you now only see our bottom four, and we will just go over those bottom four first, and then we will move along. So I will talk about Merck's team a little bit later and mention why I have him a little bit higher, but also maybe some other weaknesses that I also saw, and Turbo mentioned quite a lot actually. So for me at the bottom, it's really sad to see, but it's the Los Angeles Rams coached by Manny Brolick, and it was really hard because like he started off his team maybe a little bit weird, but it started off quite strongly. But in the end, what Matty decided on this season, and he also told me that he wanted to have a fun team, but also a little bit of a meme in it, but just a fun team that can still win pretty much every game, but just not an all-out team. So what you also might have saw is that he has a boosting 9 points left over, so he could probably picked up like 1 or 2 stronger ones than he actually did. So what he now has is pretty much, if you just look at his team, which you might have from his draft analysis or such, that he started off pretty strongly with like Scolipede, Hoopa and Bound, Crocodile, Mega Blasters, all 4 really strong mons. But then he finished later on his team with like a Trampa, a Crabominable, an Archeops. Like those are not that bad of mons, but they are not really proven in this format, and that might have a good reason. And also he could have just used his points a little bit more wisely, and he could have gotten some stronger mons, but he decided that he wanted like some speed pass with Scolipede and some trick room options with like Bronzong, and then also Cresselia I think might not synergize that well with his team, but I think with he just wanted it for the support, like dual screens, Lunar Dance and such, and he just wanted to have a fun team, and that's all fair. But if you just look at individual mon quality and just the quality of the teams, his team is just a little bit lower than others, because he has 8 points left over, and because he has those lower tier mons that he picked for a reason, but also they don't weigh up to some other powerhouse that he could have gotten if he didn't get Drampa, but like a 14-point mon. A 14-point mon is like maybe twice as good as a Drampa. So I think that's really what hinders Matty's team, but that does not mean that Matty's team overall is really bad as such, because he has a really strong options with like Hoopa and Bound, which it's not that proven in the NPL, but he made it his Z user. And what's kind of nice about it is that Hoopa and Bound has a move called Z Snatch, and if you use Z Snatch, you get +2 speed, which means Hoopa with +2 speed and is free to switch up moves. With 3 moves, you can probably just 1-shot or 2-shot every team. So it becomes a really scary late game threat, and it was already a really great breaker. As I mentioned, he has some trick group options, he has some Scolipede speed pass options. If he gets those off, he can really sweep some teams with his more offensive threats. Like, for example, Mega Blasters can be quite scary if you get some speed to it. Some other unfortunate things, however, are that he has some bulky mons like that Bronzong, like that Mega Blasters, but he does not really have any real wish passes or clerics that might help his more bulkiest mons that lack recovery. So that's a little bit unfortunate actually, but I think overall, as I mentioned, his teams, the quality of his team could have been a bit better if he just used up all his points, I believe, and then he would have definitely gotten a little bit of a higher spot than he now has. Overall, I want to end off that his weaknesses to resist ratio is pretty impressive actually, despite that he has maybe not the best mons. He's not really weak to one specific typing, which is always really nice to have on your draft. So yeah, that's it for me about Matty's team. I think you have Matty's team a little bit higher, so you will talk about it a little bit later on.
Yeah, I've got a few interesting things to say about Matty's team.
Okay.
We'll get to that. We will get to that.
Okay, that's cool. So now we can probably talk about your number 15 and also my number 14. I think we can do it in one swoop, and that is the Baltimore Braviaries, coached by Moxie and Fernip. So what do you have to say about this team?
Well, as much as I like Moxie, Moxie's, well, looking at his team for sort of from a fresh perspective again, he has a very sort of Moxie sort of standard team. There's a lot of reliable mons that are there. You got your Mega Venusaur as a proven reliable mon in draft format. You've got Infernape as a proven reliable fighting type, and Zygarde, so Togekiss is also a proven reliable mon in draft format as well. well. His mons that he's comfortable with, like Snorlax, but then he's got some mons that sort of could be a bit 50-50. So your Necrozoma is always going to be reliable, but it runs a set of 3. It's got 3 or 4 good sets, and then a Dark type mainly puts a stop to that. Infernape's a good breaker for the Dark types that stop Necrozoma, which is kind of nice. And he's got a reliable Fairy in Togekiss, which is great. But then you see Snorlax, then you see Registeel, Almo, and Rampardos, which are less reliable. I like the Rampardos pickup in a sense because that offensive rock, if you can find a good way of running it, could be awesome. Although Rampardos is a bit annoying because it's quite frail and it's very slow. So I don't know how it fits in. If he had a sort of a Trick Room core, that would work, but he doesn't. So Rampardos could be interesting there. Even with a Scarf, it's still pretty slow. Almo's kind of set up for dirt, and you don't really want to get set up on if you have a Mega Venusaur because that's one of the best ways of breaking it. And he doesn't have anything that's going to stop setup that much. From what I can check, I don't think he has a Haze user, which kind of sucks. Z Infernape is good. Z Fighting is generally one of the best sort of Z moves you can use, as well as Z Fire. 2 great breaking types to use the Z move on. He also gets Z Gunk Shot as well, which is nice. Zygarde 10 is sort of 50-50 in format. It's got great speed tier, but without a band or a life orb, even the setup set's not that great, so it's not the best breaking dragon type if you really think of that. And his team doesn't appreciate offensive fighting types. Yes, he has a Mega Venusaur, but if you pair a fighting type and a psychic type, if you have a good fighting psychic core, it sort of just runs through his team. That's what I don't really like about it. He also, although having a Necrozoma and a Registeel, his rocks options are quite good, but his removal options limit is just to a defogging Togekiss. So his removal's not going to help him, and his team looks like it would get chipped down by spikes, toxic spikes, and stealth rocks. So he's got to watch the hazard aspect on his part.
Yeah,
that's what I was saying.
Yeah, all fair. I think you pretty much hit the nail on that one. Some things to add. I think you covered it pretty nicely. Like, also one thing to notice, like, one thing I always look at teams is like their speed tiers, and when I look at his speed tier, like, yes, he has those great fast monsters, Excelgor, Jolteon, Zygarde 10% from Infinite, all really speedy, and I really loved it about his team. But then if you look a bit further, then he has nothing between base 80 and base 108, which means every mon in that speed tier can pretty much run like Adamant or Modest, and can invest a lot of HP into it, and that can be really scary for his team, and that's also something I don't really like. And also the lack of Dark type is also a little bit concerning, because bulky Psychics might just run through this team, because Necrozma and Registeel might just be setup fodder for them, and if they get setup fodder, then a bulky Psychic can just sweep his whole team, as I mentioned. And like, he already has another mon like Alomomola, which is a bit of a hit and miss mon. Like, some people can really use it well, like Gypsy has used it in the past to quite some good extent, but it also has been misused, and it's quite a hard mon to use. So his team can be a little bit of setup fodder, and as you mentioned, he does not have much of a Haze or a Phaser on his team, and also his offense does not, besides Infinite, does not have the best punch, just to say. Like, his breaking potential mostly relies on setting up, and then those mons can break some teams, but without setup they can't really break a team, which is for me also a little bit concerning, that his breakers are not that strong without some setup. And yeah, as you mentioned, Psychics might be a little bit of Psychic and fighting types might be a little bit concerning, but also just ground types in general. Like, Togekiss is his flying mon, and only Excelgor is really a resist, because Mega Venusaur is part poison type. So ground types can be really scary for his team, because Excelgor is not that bulky, and Togekiss, you can run some coverage like Stone Edge for it. And then also offensive rocks, he only has Psyduck and Registeel. As I mentioned, Edgequake is really scary for his team, I believe. And I think adding that up with everything you said, that's why we have his team just a little bit lower. And I definitely think he can maybe improve. Maybe he just knows how to work around those weaknesses. We will just have to see in the upcoming weeks. But maybe he will just change some things up, and with a few additions, maybe he can patch up those weaknesses. But I think for now, it's fair to say that, yeah, we have him in like the bottom 4, and he will definitely improve, and we will definitely have to see how he will perform. But his team is just a little bit lacking. So then for my number 15, and you have him quite high up, and I'm definitely curious, and we probably have some discussions about it. But for me, at number 15 are the Florida Persians, coached by Top Tier Boy. So with Top Tier Boy, basically, when I was looking at this team, I was just thinking to myself, okay, this is probably one of the weirdest team I've seen drafted. This might be because the boy is just high all the time and he just drafted on the spot. I don't know. You don't know with him. But it has some nice niches, like he has Rain with Mega Swampert. I've not seen that used that much. Then he has some Hurricane spam with Tornadoes and Articuno, which in the rain is pretty solid. His first few rounds were some solid mons. Z Guard Jump, I've used it in the past. It's really great for breaking mons. It can just get you some certain KOs, especially after a Swords Dance. So there were definitely some aspects that I like, but just like the whole synergy and just some glaring weaknesses to the team as a whole was really a little bit concerning for me. So also when you just look at his speed, he caps at Tornado's Eye at 111. Rain in the rain, Swampert is faster, but without rain it's not. Between 85 and 100 there are no real speed there. He has sticky webs, which really helps out his team, but he has to let those sticky webs stay up, which might be a little bit hard to do because I believe he doesn't have a ghost up. Like he has Bishop, which has Defiant, which is really cool, and I believe also Tornado's Eye has Defiant.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so that's really cool for the default. But if he also had a ghost up, then he could reliably get webs up like for the whole game. And if you can do that, his team becomes a little bit more scary. But he lacks that ghost up, which is a little bit concerning. While on the other hand, he has doubled up on a lot of typings. Like he has a lot of flying types. He has a lot of water types, and those types are a bit spammable, but also if you have like a solid check for them, you have a solid check to halve his team, which is a little bit concerning. And overall I think that's pretty much what I could say about his team. And then just to round it off with those resists, if you just look at his team as a whole, he has no fairy resist. He also has acknowledged this himself. He knows about this weakness, but it's still a big weakness. And then Bishop. Bishop is his flying, ghost, and normal resist. And other than that, he has no resist to those typings. And those three typings offensively can really, really hurt his team and are also quite common actually. And also he has 4 mons that are weak to ice, and the only resist are Keldeo and Bishop, which are both not really bulky mons. So those resists were really concerning for me. Just the team synergy is a little bit concerning to me, and a lot of double typings to say is a little bit concerning to me. And all those things together has made me put him at number 15. And he can definitely prove me wrong, but that's what I have to say about it for now. So, you at number 14 have Razor and the Chicago Bears and his quite offensive team. So why have you rated him so low?
Okay, so Razor drafted like Razor would, and I think according to that, this is a great first cup. But all both of Mammoth Swine stabs. I believe that's the correct stat. If not, blame Shreegraver, because I'm pretty sure he said it in the VPL videos. Azumarill is a very, very versatile mon if you know how to use it in League format. It's actually one of my favorite water types to use in League format. And if you trust the Rizzy Powell's top 5 video, it's one of the top 5 ones in draft format. But that's a bit outdated. We don't know about that. But there are some things I don't like about this team. His double fighting core, I think he's got 2 sort of budget fighting types that aren't amazingly great. Mienshao and Chestnut. I think Mienshao is 11 points wasted. He could have picked something else up for a good amount of 11 points, considering he's already got the fighting type in Chestnut, and it sort of does the job. All right, it doesn't give him high jump kick spam or regenerator, but Chestnut can do the job as a fighting type, and you can spend 11 points on something a bit more valuable. Fortress, again, as a defensive mon, I'm not really rating, because with Fortress, when you give it EV spreads, it's very hard to give it a balanced EV spread where it's going to take a physical hit and a special hit. Generally, you have to pump out its special defense just to make up for the fact it's got a big difference in them. So therefore, it's not that reliable. Plus, a quad weakness as one of your core members of a defensive core, especially pairing it with Chestnut, means that he's got a fire weakness on his hands. And fire is incredibly hard to switch into, considering he's got Mammoth Swine, Fortress, Chestnut, Frostlass, and Klinklang is 5 fire weaknesses on his team. All right, he's got a Mega Latios, but he doesn't really want to be switching in on that, even on a powerful fire type. I mean, a Flare Blitz from a Banded Infernape is still going to hurt a Mega Latios no matter if it's resisted or not. Same for a Azumarill. Plus both of those plus an Infinite, for example, carries U-turn and gunk shot, and there you go. That's a core broken straight up, offensive and defensively. So that's a bit of a problem in my eyes. I like Aerodactyl. That's cool. Thunderous T as a Z user is very good, although I prefer Thundy Eye, but again, that's just up to preference. They're about the same. Although Thundy T usually needs an item in support, so I don't know how Z's going to work for him there unless he runs setup. Kling an unproven cool 2-point pickup, although I think it's not going to do much for him. And it's that and Fortress aren't great steel types to be supporting your team defensively. So it could be quite interesting, this team. And that's what I've really got to say about it.
Okay, that's fair. So, first of all, we will probably just move it up a little bit because we want to try to keep this under an hour. It might be a little bit over, but if we continue at this extensive pace, we probably will might even fill 2 hours. So we will probably go over it a little bit quicker. So if you are a fan of one of those teams, if you are just a coach of one of those teams and you want an in-depth analysis, you can always hit us up. You can always ask why your team is rated so low. We are always happy to apply and get a healthy discussion going. But for now, we'll just move over to the Bayern Munich, which I have at number 13, and which you will see Turbo has at number 12. So we will just swoop it in one go. And yeah, I've Shadi quite low, and he's probably also not that happy with it. But when I look at his team and just on paper, what I see is not that scary of a team actually. And when I look at his team a bit further, I'm thinking, okay, this is probably just a balanced team that's really centered around Volcarona sweeping. And I know Shadi has done this in the past, where he drafted the team around Mega Charizard X with I believe he had a Jirachi or a Tapu Fini or such, and he won one championship with it, his only championship actually, which is really impressive. But also in the PPL, it was a bit of a hit and miss. There were some unfortunate games for sure, but for him this might work. But when I look at the team, I don't see the real threats that you are seeing from some other teams. And also, when you look at his speed, he has quite a lot at 100, 110, but only Floatzel tops above it at 115. And Floatzel, it's a cool mon, and it was not many points, but for sure, Floatzel you won't be bringing every game. And also, when you look a bit further down below, between 74 and 100, there is nothing in speed tier wise. So everything like a Nidoking could just run Modest and just break his whole team, and still has a lot of bulk to spare, which means it won't die in one hit. Just that's one example. So that could be really scary for a team like his. Some other things I did like is that he got most of his typings covered. He balanced it really out. He has some nice hazard options with Scarm and Seismitoad, which he knows how to use, and then Weezing for Toxic Spikes. It's really nice. And then he has some nice defocus for once in Latios and Skarmory. Normally he doesn't draft them, but with Volcarona they are definitely needed. And I think overall his offense, as I mentioned, just not too strong. Especially it's mostly reliant on the Volcarona on the special side, and then Kangaskhan on the physical side. And yes, you have Pangoro, but Pangoro probably is easily revenged if you don't scarf it. And also just when you look at his setup options and like his main win cons, as I mentioned, Volcarona, you have Latios, and then Comfy too. Those are quite some things, but Comfy you know what it does, and then Kang and Floatzel could be a little bit, but also you know what those mons do. They are not really that versatile in what they do, and I just don't see his team being that threatening to most teams. And I think he might realize this himself. He might just prove me wrong and has Volcarona like cleaning up every game. I don't know how he will do it, but that's just my 2 cents on his team.
I mean, I think you hit the hit, and you sort of again hit the nail on the head. A lot of Shai's team, you look at it and it's like, where's the scary mon? I mean, Mega Kang is there. That's the Mega Kang and Volk. Okay, they're scary mons. Where's the next breaker? I mean, Floatzel. Is this probably the next breaker, quote unquote, in his team? I don't think Shadi's going to like using Skarm, considering his active dislike of defoggers. Skarm is an interesting mon unless you get really creative with it, which he could do. Shadi's team screams, I die to Zardex. Fortunately, nobody has drafted Zardex. which is quite interesting actually, because there's Shardy's fire resists are Floatzel and Seismitoad. I think that's it. Although Seismitoad, Shardy rates hugely, it doesn't get reliable recovery, and neither does Spotsel. So a strong fire type, a strong breaking fire type is going to run through Shardy's team. Although Latias is there, that's easily checked by another Mon. So that's a bit of a problem in my eyes. I think Shardy will make changes as the weeks go on. I think he'll lose some of the sort of meh attackers and bring in a few more big hitters, because I think that's he needs to change his team up. But I mean, I'm going to give it a few weeks and see how the teams go. Maybe he'll prove us wrong. Maybe he's got some balance in mind that he thinks is perfect. But in both of our eyes, it's not a scary team, and I think Shardy needs something a little bit scarier than this.
Yeah, for sure.
So we just jump on to number, where are we at? 14? Are we at 14?
No, we are a little bit higher. Actually, we now covered Shardy, which is number 13 for me, 12 for you.
Oh, I haven't talked about my 14, so I'll quickly go over my 14, which is oh no, sorry, no, I have my 13. Yeah, sorry, my bad.
Yeah, so go ahead.
So yeah, my 13 is Rob and the Gotham City Golux. You will know that Rob won the NPL Minors in a very interesting game against. Was it? I want to say it was Magic, or was it?
No, it was Mono.
It was Mono. Yeah, that's my bad.
Yeah.
You'll see Mono later. But Rob has drafted a very Rob team again. It's quite an efficient team in my eyes. It's got Mons that do their job really well, but he's got Mons that just do their job and don't really do much else. So you've got, Victini's pretty versatile, but it's there as a great fire spammer. It'll be great against a lot of the teams in the league, because there are a lot of teams that have a core weakness which Victini will love to break. Thunder IZ is very, very good because of its sort of capabilities of different types of different coverage. But then you've got Sizzle, Hippowdon, Roserade, Jellicent, Florges, all only do one thing but do it reasonably well. So it's slightly easier to prep around because of that. Sizzle is a bit questionable in league format. There's some people really enjoy it, some people really don't. Then Roserade I really liked, but apart from my favorite AV set, which everyone jokes about that I run all the time, it has a few other good sets, but it's difficult because its EV spread is kind of awkward for you to get a really good set out of it. Jellicent's is a great defensive Mon and a good spin blocker, but it only does that and doesn't hit very hard at all. And he's got the same with Florges. It's a great defensive Mon with reliable recovery, but it doesn't hit very hard unless you get a couple of calm winds up if you want to do that. And even then, 4-move slot syndrome kind of hurts it. Zwelios and Primeape is a cool pickup. Mega Sharpedo, do you have the Mega first turn?
No, Mega Sharpedo is the only exception. You can protect turn 1 and then go from there.
In which case, I think that's quite interesting, that as a pickup, because I think Rob could do pretty well with that. But then I think, why pick Jellicent up? Okay, you need a bulky water as well as Sharpedo. And I think they do pair well together, but it's a bit interesting in my eyes. I think the team is a bit flimsy other than his wall core of the Florges and Jellicent. So it could go down to a big sweeper if someone gets set up on him. And I believe he's got 2 rockers in Azelf and Hippowdon, and only Sizzle removes, I want to say, from top class, which is not reliable at all. So that could be a bit interesting. But otherwise, I don't think Rob's got the most efficient team in terms of versatility.
Yeah, all fair. So now we will probably just, because I have Rob quite high up, and I will tell why. But we will just move along to the other part of the bottom half. So number 9 to 12. So we already talked about Shardy extensively, and I have at number 12 the Tampa Bay Frogadiers by our boy Vert, which was my co-analyst last season. And he drafted quite an interesting team, and when I was like he was going with his first few picks, I was really liking his team. But I think, and he knows it himself, his team is a bit top heavy, but I didn't really like how he finished it up. Like, I liked Zygarde, Voodoo, Arcanine. I was really interesting. I think Tentacruel was not even that bad of a pickup there. But then he went on with Pinsir, Lego, Katana, all still really strong mons. But then he finished off with Rotom, Umbreon, Smeargle, Claydol, which is not the strongest finish, just to say to his team. So overall, like his last 4 mons, like Rotom, I know he really lost that mon, and it's really, I also know it's quite an alright mon, and I think he will definitely bring it to some games. Umbreon is like, he can try to use it as the glue to his team, because it can pass some wishes to mons like Tentacruel that are some bulky of itself but does not have reliable recovery. But also Umbreon is also really passive and it's not the best dark type. And then you have Smeargle and Claydol. Smeargle is really hard to use. If you can use it well, it can be great, but if you can't use it well, it won't do anything. And Claydol is just some lukewarm garbage. So yeah, overall his team relies probably on his first few months. It's quite offensive and he might like that, but just it's offense, but his fastest monster Katana at 109, and I definitely am not a fan of that. When you have an offensive team, for me always draft some mons above that 110 benchmark, preferably 2 is really great, but his speed is just quite low, and yes, Smeargle could try to get some webs up, but I don't know if that's really reliable for him. Also, when you look at his stealth rockers, those are Claydol, Nihilego and Mega Pinsir, so mostly this will be Nihilego because Claydol won't be brought much, and Mega Pinsir you don't want to put rocks on that one. It's nice that he has some T-Spikes. I think that's really nice with a team with a Zygarde and a Pinsir on it. But also when you then look at his removal for Pinsir, he has Katana, Tentacruel and Claydol for removal. I don't think he will bring D for Katana. I don't think he will bring Claydol that much. And Tentacruel is then his only removal. I think that's not enough. He talked about that he might try to pick up Starmie. Starmie might be a little bit better, but then again Starmie is also pursuit trapped, and if that dies then he has no removal anymore. Overall, some mons can definitely win him games, like he has some great setup, like Zygarde 50% is one of the best mons in Gen 7 just due to that 1000 arrows. Mega Pinsir is always really scary. Katana can be really scary, especially if you let it set up and it can get some boosts going to it. He has some great Scarfers that can win some games, but overall because this team is so top heavy, I think people can try to prepare for it. The team is not that bulky. He has some natural bulk on his mons, but not much recovery, not much reliable mons that can take some hits, apart from that Umbreon, which is then a bit passive. And also if you look at his special offense, there's not much special offense actually. There's only Nihilego and Rotom, which can be dealt quite easily. Nihilego does not have the best coverage. Arcanine could go special, but not preferably. Tentacruel only has base 80 special attack, so he's no real breaking powers on the special side. So like Will-O-Wisp could really hurt him, and just some physical bulk in general. And then just to finish off this ramble, he went for Z-Zygarde, and that might really work for him because Z-Zygarde can definitely work with like Outrage, Sludge Wave, that sort of things. But maybe if he just is going to use Katana a lot, why not make it your Z-Mon? I think Katana with Z usage is really great. With an SD up, his like base 80 moves get powered up to like base 160, and then they pack a real punch, and if they get that KO, he gets to +3 attack and he can go from there. So we will have to see if he might change it in the future. We don't know. So that's pretty much everything I have to say about this team. I believe you have it a bit higher up, I believe, or not? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I've got a few good things to say about that, but we'll save that for a bit.
No.
I believe we jump on to my
number 11, which are the restaurants actually. And
okay, so you've talked about the restaurants a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'll sort of spin what I liked about Matty's team, which made me put it a little higher than the others. Now, as you said, it's a weird-looking team. Scolipede round 1 is interesting, but you've got to think about why he did that. Now, Scolipede round 1, Scolipede does one thing. Well, it does a lot of things pretty well. It's a good breaker. It sets up on people, and it speed passes. If you look at Matty's team, there's one thing that it could do decently well, and that's speed pass. He's got Hooper-U, Blastoise, Mega Blastoise, Chandelure, Drampa, Archeops, and Crabominable, all mons that have the potential to break really, really hard. Now, if he speed passes into any of those mons, he potentially could get an early game or a mini sweep on, depending what. And if he maintains his Scolipede well, he could also do it multiple times in one game, which is good for him in that sense. But then you look at Matty's team again, and you see Bronzong, Cresselia, which is a bit interesting, and Whimsicott, or Bronzong and Cresselia mainly, and you're like, well, what are their main aspects, and then you see Trick Room, and you're like, oh, okay, that's a different aspect of the team you now have to prep for, because you can prep for Speed Pass, but if you bring a Trick Room team, you're then going to get counter swept because you might have prepped for a fast threat that's going to break your team, but then he uses a intensive Trick Room because all his mons bar potentially Scolipede and Archeops work really well on the Trick Room, which is why I think he put Drampa there. As much as I'm not a fan of the Drampa pick, I can see it working pretty well. Carbonimal could be interesting because he's done what, Pokegame tried to do last year, we think, but a lot more effectively, in my opinion. Whimsicott is nice because of the support aspect of the mon. I don't think he's going to be doing much offensively on his team, but I think it could sort of patch up the holes he might have in a team, whereas he needs like a sort of prankster mon that will do a specific job to get rid of a specific threat to his team. I think that's what Whimsicott is going to be doing there. And knockoff spam is going to be great to be limiting the opponent's options of stopping his mons. So I think that those little sort of intertwining aspects, like combined with maybe a lead Rocks Archeops, could be huge when coming from Matty. As you said before, Z-Snatch Hooper U, it makes it so that Hooper U could be in the back of a Trick Room team, ready to sort of sweep just in case the Trick Room gimmick doesn't work. So I think that multiple layers of the team make it a bit more of a threat than when you first look at the team and think it's a bit disjointed and weird. So I think when teams like Jolt and people who properly look and prep of every single aspect are going to have a hard time prepping for this team because there's so many different things you've got to think about. And that's why I ranked it higher, not because of maybe like the formulas that you have to conform to when you're drafting.
Yeah, I think that's all fair, and I believe all your points were really great, and I think all those aspects is why Maddie exactly drafted a team like this. But that, for me, it just didn't weigh up to like the individual quality of the mons, and that it could be just so much better. But we will definitely have to see if Maddie proves me wrong. He most likely will, because it's Maddie and he's a really solid battler. But we will just have to see. And funnily enough, I had Maddie at 16, you had him at 11, and you had Merc at number 16, and I have him at number 11. So I will talk a little bit about Merc's team. So basically Merc's team is a little bit of a balanced team with some setup win cons, which is basically Merc's playstyle, which he really loves, and that's also what I really love about his team, that he drafts a team I think he's quite comfortable with, and it's always nice. There are just a little bit of downsides, and that's why he's number 11, and that's that his only mon that tips 100 speed stat is Talonflame, and that's just really bad. You at least want like 2-3 months above 100, probably a few months above 110 even, but he just does not have this, which is really unfortunate. And also, if you look at his typings, he lacks a bit of a defensive steel type. He has 4 flying mons. That's all not really nice. But then some other things about his team that's really nice is that he has quite a lot of recovery. He has nice stealth walkers. He even has 4 stealth walkers, which is really great. He has some great hazard removal for his Dragonite and Talonflame, which is always really needed for those mons. And he also has some nice setup options to win the game, like the Dragonite, like the Lucario. Those are pretty much winning some games, probably for him. And also just Celebi and Mega Guard can be really scary in, if they set up, and they can probably break a lot of teams. So I think overall his team is quite decent, but just due to that weakness with the speed, he lacks some solid typings, whereas like Talonflame is his only fairy resist. You mentioned about the rock weakness he has, and besides that he also has a bit of an ice weakness, because he has 4 mons weak to ice. Only Kabutops and Lucario are the resist. Again, not some bulky mons, so he definitely has some type weaknesses. He has some speed issues. I think if he might patch them up in like some future transactions, or just he plays around this, I don't know how he will, but he might, then I think it's a quite scary team. But just those weaknesses put them at 11 for me.
Yeah, that's completely fair enough, and I do see where you're coming from. I didn't even notice the 100 speed thing. That was a great pickup. I didn't even see that. That's the problem. That is a problem. I'm sure Merc will fix it up though. That's for sure. And now I believe we're on to my number 10.
Yeah.
That's right. Now, both of us, I know Riz is not going to like this, but both of us have got Riz below Cheese.
Yeah.
So sorry the Sunflowers have taken a fat L this season again in terms of the pre-draft power rankings. But hopefully Riz can get his revenge during the actual games. But I'm talking about Riz right now. And I do like Riz's team fundamentally. I like it would be a very sort of similar team to what I would draft, except it's not bulky enough. And that's the problem with it. Kieran Black Clefable's a great core, but he needs something that supports. Joel is the master of using Clefable, and he knows that you need something to support Clefable defensively so it doesn't just get overwhelmed by every single defensive mon. And usually that's a bulky enough steel type. His steel type is Excadrill. Now, although Excadrill has a bulky set, it's not going to be supporting Clefable that well. I mean, you get a fire type, it's going to break his team. Kieran Black, Clefable, Excadrill, Gengar, Breloom, Mesprit, all drop to a decent fire type. Okay, Mega Arrow's a nice asset, but I think he should have gone with a bit more of a bulkier Mega. It's great for its speed. A Mega Arrow Kieran Black is a scary offensive core, but he's going to have trouble switching into things. His setup potential isn't really there. I don't see much that's going to set up other than Breloom. And I mean, Mach Punch priority under Swords Nuts hurts, but he's got to get set up with a Breloom. Grass typing is pretty hard to set up with because of its extensive amount of weaknesses. His bulky water being Lantern is a good coverage for Greninja. It's kind of nice synergy for his team. But my main problem with it, although his offense is going to cause a lot of damage, he needed something that's going to support that Clefable and be a bit more defensive. I don't think Excadrill was the right one to do that with. And that's the problem I have with Riz's team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really fair. And I will shortly go over why. I looked at it from a little bit of a different aspect, but first I will go over the Houston Toxapex coached by Trev. So what Trev did was a little bit of a weird looking team maybe, but it's a little bit of like a bulky offensive team with like Blissey as that fat wish passer and then Weavile as like the cleaner of the team. That's how I kind of looked at the team. I really like the Mega Gallade and Weavile. I've used those mons in the past. I really like those mons. They are really solid actually, especially Weavile is a really great late game cleaner like most of the time. But then if you just look at some key typings, he does not have a dragon type. Victory Bell is like his grass type. Torkoal is his fire type. So while Torkoal Victory Bell is like really cool niche sun core, it's not the key grass type you want and the key fire type you might want. So that's a little bit concerning for me. Then I think the hazard aspect is really great with his team. But furthermore, if you just look at it, he has some nice setup with Weavile, Mega Gallade, Doublade. Circuitry is also really cool, which is also a C-move user, and I've used Circuitry recently. It's really great at breaking teams, and with Z-axis it can also have some support C-moves that boost its speed, like Electric Terrain, Hypnosis, which really boost it up. But I don't think this all weighs out to like some of the key weaknesses this team just has. If you just look only at the typings, just when you look at the typings, he does not have a ground resist actually. His ground immunity is Oxy, and there it is. That was it. He has 4 weaknesses to it, and only Oxy has an immunity. Then also Doublade is his only normal resist and immunity, so if Doublade goes down, he has a bit of a problem. Finny is also his main water and dog resist, because the other resist for those typings are either Victory Bell or Weavile, which are not that bulky. So when Finny dies, water and dog are really scary to switch into, and I think those 3 mons are heavily pressured in their role and might not even perform it that well. And just when he's weak to such key typings, that's why I put Trev at number 10. I think if you can patch up those weaknesses mainly, his team might be a little bit more solid, but for now I have to rate it at number 10.
That's completely fair enough. I think we're cutting it really slow. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. So I've gone from the Sunflowers to the Suncloud. We've devolved. We've gone to Cheese. Cheese is making his return to the NPL after what, 3 seasons? 2 seasons, I want to say.
Was season 5 in the finals. So
okay. Yeah, so Cheese got scared for a season and then has
Mm-hmm.
come back. So
Yeah,
he's drafted. I don't know how much experience Cheese has in Gen 7 format. I don't think
not
it's that
much.
much,
No.
and I think that's why it's shown where he hasn't drafted a Gen 7 mon.
Yeah.
So that could be quite interesting. But I mean, Cheese is looking like he's drafting stuff that he's comfortable with. I
Mm-hmm.
like the Raikou pickup that late, round 8. Raikou is a really nice pickup
Mm-hmm.
that late in the game. For 13 points, I think that's pretty decent value as well from what I'm looking at. That's a very good, decent value pick for 13 points. Heatran Sylveon is the classic Gen 6 core. So Heatran Sylveon Amoonguss is a pretty classic Gen 6 core with a
Mm-hmm.
bulky support of Mandibuzz. What I do like is he supported Donphan very well. People draft Donphan wrong. Donphan is not here. If you ask Merk will completely agree that Donphan is not here to be a physically defensive wall. It does not do that job very well. It is there to be a bulky offensive wall that can rapid spin. That's what Donphan does well. And with Mandibuzz there and Amoonguss there and Heatran Sylveon, he's freed up his Donphan to go Choice Banded, to go Rock Polish if you really want to
Mm-hmm.
do it Envy. He can set up rocks freely and have 3 attacks because Donphan's got surprisingly good coverage. So that's really nice. Manaphy's one of the best mons in the game. With Z support, I think Z Manaphy's slightly overrated because I've used it before in my championship run in the NPL, which ended in me losing the finals. Manaphy Z is good, but its Z set isn't great. It's just there as a sort of added thing you can prep for. Heatran Z is much better in my opinion, but I mean, Cheese has got much Gen 7
Mm-hmm.
experience, so I think that's probably why he didn't pick Heatran. Is there rules on him changing Z users? Or is
There
it
are, but we might have a discussion when I discuss the team because I fairly disagree with you. I really like
oh,
C
yeah, that
Manaphy.
could be
So,
interesting?
okay.
But yeah, I think that's personal preference. That
Yeah.
might just come down to
Mm-hmm.
personal preference. The little sand core he's got going on is nice as well. With the Stoutland there as well.
Yep.
That could be just like a you saw Zazo when he played that normal spam game last season.
Yeah.
Stoutland is there. It can do that really well just in case
Mm-hmm.
there's a team that doesn't like normal types at all. Swallow is great in Gen 7.
Yeah.
That might be a little pickup that he might not have realized is very good in Gen 7.
Mm-hmm.
But Swallow I really like in Gen 7. Galade's just sort of the fighting type that fills the gap. I think he had 6 points remaining and Galade
Mm-hmm.
isn't a bad pickup for 6 points. So I think it's a fairly decent rounded team. I think that it's not fast enough, in my opinion, although Raikou's there. It's quite reliable, it's quite bulky, but he might struggle in terms of setup and sort of speedy mons. That's the
Mm-hmm.
sort of fall that I have. I think it's quite a reliable team.
Yeah.
Stat bang in the middle sort of team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough. So I have at number 9 a team that you rated a little bit lower, and that's Chicago Bewares over Razor. So it's always really difficult to rate a team that's like really hyper offensive. True, when almost all the teams are like either bulky offense, maybe balanced. He drafts a little bit out of the ordinary, and that's just his playstyle, and he really likes this. And if he uses this great, I think it's a really solid team. I won't go over too much because you covered pretty much everything. Some things. He has great speeders. I really like it about his team. It's just that 2 months are a little bit iffy on his team, like the Chestnut and the Klinklang. Like Klinklang, a little bit unproven. I don't know if he will use it at all. And Chestnut just does not fit his team. Like, he has Frostlass for spikes and can be quite a nice lead. He has Mienshao for that high jump kick and that fighting spam. Like, why draft Chestnut? You don't even need that. You don't have bulk on your team, so why just draft a Chestnut? That was a bit questionable. Maybe he will explain it to me. I think other than that, his team is just really scared to prep for. You don't want to prep for like so many physical breakers, and then there's like Latios, Tandy, Azumarill. You don't want them to let them set up, and then Mamoswine and Entei for just breaking your teams. Like, prepping for his team is a pain in the ass. But if you find like the right way to deal with it, I think you can definitely deal with it, because his team definitely has some weaknesses. I think the main weakness is like that he has no actual ghost resist because he lacks a dog or a normal type, which he might patch up with like trading away his Chestnut. I think that would be a great addition. But overall, it's hyper offense. It's where Razor thrives, and it might be really hard for him, but I think he definitely can make quite a good run this season. So with that, I think we will move on to our actually top 8. And starting off at number 8, we have both a Tampa Bay team, but different teams. You have the Tampa Bay Frogadiers, and I have the Luxrays. So just, you can go ahead.
So this is the closest thing we've got to a matching team.
Yeah.
But the Tampa Bay Frogadiers, you've already talked about them a little
Yeah.
bit. I do agree with you on many levels. Apart from the fact that Claydol is lukewarm garbage. uh, you have to be, as an analyst, you have to be careful. As Burke did, I think 2 seasons ago in the GBA, he said Steelix was hot garbage, and it was in contention for defensive one of the year. So you got to be careful about that. Claydol, I don't know, it's not the best one in the world, but I think it can do a job on Bird's team. I didn't notice the web. Like ace 100 and had a lot weaker stats because its attacks aren't great. I think it could be a good one, but it's too slow in my opinion. The one thing I think you majorly overlooked is the curse pass threat of Umbreon. If you curse pass into defensive Arcanine, that thing's gonna be here. He's got 2 mons with extreme speed. Curse passing into those, or Mega Pinsel with feint slash quick attack. A curse pass Umbreon could be a big threat. Also, grassy terrain, leaf bladed, banded Kartana hits like a bitch. Although I think that Gypsy King said himself that I think it was Gypsy King in his one of his Q&A videos for his subscriber account, said that he wasn't a fan of Tapu Bulu because grass isn't an offensive typing. I think that's where Verd is going to struggle because he's got 2 offensive grass types. I think that with grass not being the most hugely offensive typing, and both Tapu Bulu and Kartana have a real problem breaking fire types. I think a fire type is a bit of a problem to Verd's team. Also, if with Zygarde 50 as a Z user, again, I completely agree with you. He's then limiting his... If he wants to use a ground DMZ with the grassy terrain up, then it's weakened. Although 1,000 Arrows isn't affected by grassy terrain, ground DMZ is. So he's like weakening that sort of aspect of it. I think that Nihilego or Kartana could have been a better Z option for him. In my opinion, I think Kartana isn't going to be that great. It has a threat, but I think Abe used it to the best it can do last season. I don't think you're going to see any better Kartana usage than that. But otherwise, I'm pretty big fan of Bird's team. Like, I think he'll do well with it. I think there's mons that he will switch about, but as Zygarde 50 is the best non-Mega Dragon type in the format, and I think he's going to use it very, very well. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I have the other Tempo Bay team at number 8, and that's the team drafted by Mono. So when I looked at Mono's team, it's like it might be a little bit unconventional, but I think he drafted a team with a lot of mons he's quite comfortable with, and also he drafted really well around Mega Lopunny, and he drafted a lot of bulk around it. He drafted a lot of hazards around it. He drafted a really reliable Pursuit Trapper in Tarento, and a mon he used in the championship run. I think it was even together with that Mega Lopunny. And then he drafted some other offensive powers like Z-Move, Mimikyu. So I really liked that about his team. Just that whole core of synergy around Lopunny, all those hazards, that reliable Dark type. I really liked it. But just when I looked further at his team, there were just some things that were a bit concerning to me. Like Lopunny is this really fast mon, but then it drops down to like Scyther and Manectric at 105. And those two are not mons you will bring often. And then you have some mons around 95 speed, but then it drops all the way down to 65 with Sandslash. So his speed tiers are really all over the place, and I really am not a fan of his speed tiers. So I hope he will patch this up, because I think they can be abused quite easily actually. Then his hazard game is just, I think, the strongest there is in this season of the NPL. Is really solid. I think his hazard removal, it's alright, and I don't think he will be removing hazards at all this season, because he just is relying on hazards up the whole game. He has some solid bulk, he has some nice breaking potential, but I think his special side is just not that great. He only has Manectric and Reuniclus on the special side, and maybe once or twice he will bring special T-Tar, but those are not special breakers at all. Like Reuniclus can be offensive Trick Room, can be Calm Mind, but without it, Reuniclus, if you wanted to use it in a defensive role, you will have a problem breaking mons on the special side, and if you are that heavily focused on the physical side, people will definitely abuse that. I think other than that, he has great setup and a great win cons on his team, and I really like that about his team. He also has quite some great resist to most of the typings. I think the only thing concerning is that Toxapex is his only ice resist, but Toxapex is quite bulky in itself, but I don't know if it's enough. but I think just the combination of his speed tiers and just that he has such a weak special side that made him number 8 for me. Further than that, I really like the team. I hope he will patch up those two things, and I think his team might really move up a lot actually. But he also might just perform really well without any special attacks and some speed. We will just have to see.
Yeah, that's completely fair enough. I do agree with you in that sense. So I've got him a little bit higher and explain why when we get to it. But for now, you talk about your next number.
Yeah, so now we will move into our actually top. We're going our top 8. So next I have the Phoenix and Floras. You talked about Riz a little bit earlier actually. When I looked at Riz team, I looked at that it was quite an offensive team, which has like Clefable as that wish passing pivot, and then Meshbit and Lantern can also be a little bit of, those are even better pivots because they can take some hits and can U-turn or full turn out respectively. And it's, for me, it was hard to tell how good this team really was. I have to see it a few weeks to really have a good opinion about it, because it just, I don't know if it was like the synergy was really well or just that it lacked something. Like you said, Clefable might be overpressured, and I definitely can agree on you with that. But if he just uses his team as like a really offensive team with like Clefable as like the pivot for potentially rocks or just wish passing, I think it's all fair. Which he has a really offensive team and really great speed stats with Mega Arrow and Greninja to top it off. He also might lack a little bit of win cons when you mentioned setup. You overlooked Blaziken, however Blaziken is a great setup user. He also has some great Scarfers, and just Mega Aerodactyl and Greninja can just clean up late game quite nicely actually. And also Greninja can set up spikes and T-spikes, and he might go the head stack route and win the game that way. So I think that his team definitely has some solid options, and I just have to see how he will use it. But that for now he's number 7, and I think if he can utilize his quite offensive team, which might not be his ideal style, he can definitely thrive this season.
It's not on the power rankings this week, because I've ranked it. Now, Jolt is an interesting one for me, because I know Jolt has drafted a team he is comfortable with, because that's what he does. And he drafts teams very, very methodically, in which he fulfills roles that he thinks, well, he basically has a set amount of, if you've ever watched drafting with the Elite, you'll know that to draft an effective team, you draft in roles, so you fulfill certain things with different ones. I think Jolt has done that, but I think looking at his team from the offset, from an unbiased perspective, I think it's going to be quite awkward for him to use. Now, the reason for this is he has Jirachi, which is a great one. I think it's very versatile and it'll work in different situations, and you can use a physical special sweeper. He's got his physical sweeper and Terrakion, starting off a ground weakness, so he's gone, okay, I'll draft Crobat and Rotom W. Now, Crobat is good in the sense that it can do a lot of things very well. It can defog, hit really hard with Brave Bird, Banded, whatever, cool. In the same sense, it's superior as well. Can hit specially and boost up, but both of those are very niche and don't have very good coverage. Rotom Wash is there to cover weaknesses, but it doesn't hit hard enough as he'd like. In the same way, Gudra and Aromatisse and Swampert all don't hit massively hard. They're all just there to sort of fill specific roles. I think when he starts to build teams, he'll find that his team isn't hitting hard enough without Terrakion or Superior, and then he's got to support them with the mons that he's got. But if those two go down, he's going to have hard trouble breaking a wall that's either set up or very, very strong with good recovery. Like, if you look at his team, other than Superior going at +2, +3, I don't see much that's going to be breaking a Reuniclus. Okay, Mega Houndoom's Dark Pulse is going to hurt a Reuniclus, but if you look at, like, things you can prep around that. I've used Mega Houndoom before. I did like it. It did get a lot more kills than I thought I would for it. And a lot of teams, as we've already shown, are weak to breaking fire types, and Mega Houndoom can do that really well. But I think Jolt is going to find this team a bit awkward, and that's why I've sort of ranked it a little bit lower, because standalone, these mons work really well, but when he's fit them together as a sort of unit, as a core, I think that's why you've ranked it as high as you have, because on the offset, all the roles are fulfilled. But I think when you get into picking 6 of these mons to fit a team, the roles you've drafted them for, you obviously lose some because you're only picking 6 mons. I think when you lose some, this is when this team is going to be awkward. Because say you need Jirachi, Terrakion, and Superior all in one game, he's then got to support those 3 mons. with perhaps Kofi, Groton Wash and Aromatis, that seems like a very balanced team. But if the three offensive mons drop, the other three aren't hitting that hard. I like the Zangoose pickup. Zangoose is premiered by Shroomraver and he's used it really well. So I think Jolt could throw a few kills in there with Zangoose. Although he's not one for a meter, he could do very well with that. But in my opinion, I think Jolt's team is slightly awkward. And although it has a lot of plus points in the fact that it fills roles very, very well and it's drafted immaculately in terms of that sense, I think practically it won't work as well as it will on paper.
Yeah, I think
if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. I think you made some fair points, and I will talk about it later on. But for now, at number 6, I have the Gotham City Golux, coached by Rob Jr. So you had him at number 13. You said his team looked a bit awkward, and it still might look a little bit awkward. But I think he just drafted a team he's quite comfortable with, and he just drafted around the offensive core Victini, Thunderous Eye, and Mega Sharpedo. And he paired it up with quite some hazard options with the Roserade and with probably Azelf and Hippo then as the rockers. And then he has actually 2 Defiant users in Thunder Eye and a Primeape, and then he also has a great spin blocker in Jellicent, so he probably will just get up his rocks and then let his offensive ones do the rest, and that's probably how he will try to win the games. And I think that's fair enough, and I really like that about his team. I think he has some great win cons with Tandy, Azelf, Mega Sharpedo. He has great Scarfers also. Great full turn core with Victini, Tandy Eye, Scizor, Azelf, Primeape, which really will pressure his opponent, especially when he has those hazards up. I think the only thing that's the most concerning is that Swillows. I don't know what it will do. He has Mega Sharpedo as a Dark type. He lacked a Dragon type, and he might bring Swillows. He might use like Rest Talk, something like that, and it might do some work, but it might just not come at all. I don't know. And his wall core is not that great. He has Hippo, Florges, Jellicent, that's mainly it. But I think Florges can support his other mons quite nicely with the Wish Pass. And yes, some mons like Florges are one-dimensional, but I think you can throw in a surprise Scarf Florges, which I've seen in the past. You might even go Calm Mind Florges. Hippowdon is a one-trick pony for sure. Jellicent also could be a Scarf or could be a Specs user. Jellicent hits surprisingly harder than you might think actually. Scizor definitely hit a miss mon, and I think overall if he uses all those mons, which might look a little bit one-dimensional, to their full potential and throw in some surprise sets, that might be a little bit hard because Rob has a Smogon background and will mostly rely on those standardish sets. If he really goes for some surprises, I think this team can make it really far actually. So that's pretty much my take on his team.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. I do see that. And the fact you've used him as a Smogon player in that sense may tie into a little bit of an explanation, which I go up to in a bit later on. But next up, I believe positions are really... no, they all count. Everyone likes their position power rankings. But we're the top 5. And at my number 5, I have the Houston Toxic Texans right above of Jolt. Sorry, pardon?
No, number 6.
No, number 6. Number 6, that's my bad. Sorry. I've numbered mine wrong on my notes, which is jokes. Number 6, we're not into the top 5 yet. But I see Trev's team as being very similar to Jolt's team. Jolt's not going to like this because they have a natural rivalry, but I do see Trev's team as a natural rival to Jolt's team. Now, Phalop did mention earlier on that Trev's team, on paper, has a lot of weaknesses, which is the complete opposite to Jolt's team. Now, I see that, but as in the complete opposite to Jolt's team, I think Trev's team in practice will work a lot better than Jolt's team will. And now, the reason I say this is because they both picked value Megas up in the sense of Mega Gallade and Mega Houndoom. I think Mega Gallade on his team works really well. He has in my opinion, the best glue in draft format, and that's All-Type Silvally. Now, All-Type Silvally is hugely overlooked because of the fact that its coverage is pretty good, considering it gets both passes, it gets U-turn, and it gets parting shot, which is really useful. It gets Bolt Beam, Flamethrower, Dragon attacks, potentially Dragon Stab, physical and special hits, both different sides. I think it's a really good, underrated glue to a team that has a lot of weaknesses. Circuitry Z is hit and miss. I've used it before. Didn't really like it, although it still did the job. And I mean, when you pick it up around, I think it's like 8, then it's a better pickup than when I picked it up round 1 when I was an idiot and didn't know what I was doing. Tapu Fini Weavile is a great little core that supports each other really well. The only problem is Tapu Fini doesn't get reliable recovery and it can't use rest if it's under terrain, which sucks. But I think he's got things that support Tapu Fini really well in Doublade and Nidoqueen as well, despite the ground weakness. Blissey might be a bit of a hit and miss mon, but I think with Trev's background in sort of like drifting towards semi-stall, but not quite stall, I think that Blissey could be used really well under Trev, although I think Chansey is better. I think his Blissey might have been cheaper. I'm not really too sure. Oh, it might just be personal preference when it comes to those. The Sun Core of Torkoal and Victory Well I used in GOT and I really liked it. I think it's a really cool little Sun Core to stick on. Often those sort of little cores look glued on, but he sort of synergized it really well because Torkoal gives him spin and rocks, and it's actually a really, really reliable fire type, which on 7 points, and it also boosts its own fire type moves now, because although it's not that strong, with 2 times fire stab, with Lava Plume with a 30% chance to burn, that's a bit of a threat. And when you've got hacks like Trev, that's more of a threat. He's got more solid rockers in Yuxi. He's got a great reliable spin blocker and Doublade. So I think when you break Trev's team down, despite the fact it's got quite a lot of weaknesses, when you're prepping for it, it might seem a little bit easier than Jolt's team. I think in practicality, when Trev gets down to it, the offensive presence of his team just seems more scary than Jolt's team, and that's why I've ranked it a little bit higher, and that's the basis of Trev's team that I'm going to argue.
Okay, I think that's really fair actually, and I think comes down to personal preference, because indeed when I looked at Trev's team I really liked it, but I was just missing some compartments of it, and I mentioned some of the key weaknesses, and that's why for me it was a little bit lower. But as you say, maybe in practicality it really works out really well, because he has some really amazing mons in that Circuitry Weavile Mega Galate core for sure. So we'll go over the top 5 right now. So to start off, my top 5, I had the Portland Timbers, coached by Togevar. So this is quite a strong team, which is drafted around the Mega Mawile. It has some Trick Room options. It is also the only team that only has 10 mons, but most of its mons are really solid and really high value mons. So first of all, if you don't know, if you haven't watched NPL at all, Mega Mawile was allowed this season because it's proven that it's probably not that broken as first was thought, mainly due to the speed, which is quite low, and that's why Toge drafted some great Trick Room options around it. And he also then picked up like C Latios, which has C Memento, which might bring back Mega Mawile that's really weakened to full health, which is really nice for him, and also weakens his opponent in the meantime. And also C Latios is also a great breaker. When you look at his speed, then it's a little bit concerning, because yes, he relied on Trick Room, and yes, he has some fast options with Latios and Taunty. He lacks anything between 86 and 110, meaning that again, mons in that speed tier can really abuse their speed stat and just go with a lot of bulk and like a modest or adamant nature. And then he also has really slow mons, but between 78 and like the slow Trick Room options, he also has nothing. So base 70s can also go really ham on his team. His hazard game is a little bit weak actually, because Lola Marowak and Mega Mawile Omastar are his only rockers, while Mega Mawile you probably won't run rocks on at all. Lola Marowak you might, and Omastar you probably won't bring any game. Yes, you might bring some like elite Omastar, because it learns a lot of hazards with spikes and T-spikes, which is really nice. But I think his rockers are a bit pressured, and I think he won't get up rocks at all that much, and his only remover is Latios. Well, that's not a bad remover. I've used it in CPC, and I think it was only my only defogger, or one of my only 2 hazard remove options. And just if you have to run Latios as a defogger like pretty much any game, it really hinders the versatility of Latios. You won't be bringing like a Calm Mind Roost Latios that often. You might just like lack that one coverage option you actually want to put on, because you have to have defog, because if you don't have that great of a hazard game yourself, you don't want any hazard up at all. So I think those 2 parts of his team are a bit concerning, and that's why he's at number 5 and not higher. But just his team overall is just really scary. It's really offensive. Latios, Mawile, Diggersby, even Shell Smash, Omastar, things like that are really great win cons, really great setup. And then Taunty is a really great mon that can just clean up a game in late game. Alola Muk is a mon that is really is showing off this gen. I think it's really an amazing mon. It can be more of a setup mon, can just be your AV pivot that can just take anyone hit, dish out some powerful knockoffs, pursuit trap the mons you might want to. So I think overall quite a strong team. Just the hazard department I think is the main flaw of this team, and some key speed tiers that are not quite there. That's why it's at number 5 for me, and not in the top 4 actually.
So finally I'm into the top 5 last time, but my number 5 I have Aberforth. Now Abe, I always like the way Abe drafts. He always seems to draft mons he's comfortable with, but also have a lot of good balance. Tapu Koko Mence is a lovely little core that I do like. Mence Z is also very, very good in terms of flying spam and dragon spam. It's almost as good as Dragonite Z, but Dragonite Z gets better fire coverage and electric coverage, so that sort of rate goes there. But Mence as a mon is slightly better than Dragonite just because it's not as crippled by different things. But anyway, I digress. He's got Mega Scissor as well to support that core, which is really, really nice, as he's got he's got a strong fire resist in Slowking, so that's really nice as well. I've seen Aberforth use Dalmanitan before, and I know he can use Dalmanitan really, really well. Sarin is an interesting pickup because it's sort of quite hit and miss in leagues, but it's quite popular because it does a job fairly well. In a sense, it's a really pretty reliable rapid spinner of U-turn, and there's not many rapid spinners that do get U-turn, so I think that's got a cool little gimmick it has going for him. Abe with Nidoking could be a bit interesting because I know he's quite an all-in offensive player. I think Nidoking, what it lacks in speed, you have to work out with in terms of strategy and sort of making it come in, break them on, or using it as a toxic spike or using it as a rocker. So I think when Abe goes all out, guns blazing, Nidoking could be either a really good mon for him or it might not work out for him. It's one or the other. Gigalith is a nice little pickup because it's actually really solid mon, especially under Sand. Sand doesn't really benefit his team, and it doesn't really hinder his team. His team doesn't really care about Sand that much, but Gigalith is a lovely little rock type that hits really hard and takes hits. I like the Linoon. The Linoon is a nice little pickup because, okay, it does one thing, but now with the new interest like the Agua Berry, and I think there's another one, Figgy Berry, with those now introduced, Linoon is slightly better, and you can run it very bulky, and you don't need the speed. So, I mean, again, normal spam, if you can get that, it takes with max HP investment in EVs, I think you don't even have to have much attack investment. With a belly drum up, it's going to be extreme speed is going to be a great late game keenness. That's nice. Hooper, the non-unbound form, not a huge fan. I don't think Abe will be either, but you never know. It's a bit 50-50. But Abe has just drafted a really balanced, nice offensive team, and that's why I like it.
Yeah, for sure. So we will be moving in our top 4 right now. So you will probably now see our number 3 and number 4. So as we are just talking about Aberforth, I will just continue on what Turbo said. I had him like 2 places higher at number 3. So as you mentioned, Abe drafted a really solid team, and like last season, his team was a little bit iffy for me. I didn't really saw the synergy, but this time I really saw that his team is quite offensive, quite solid actually, with some nice defensive pivots like the Slowking, and he really likes to have a team like this. So that's what I really liked about this team. I think the only few picks were like the last few picks. I don't know if Gigalith will be as great as you mentioned because it's not that speedy. It has not much recovery. Then Hoopa hits hard, but Hoopa's also really easily pursuit trapped by pretty much any dog type because it's quite weak to it. And then Linoon, I really, as you mentioned, I like Linoon. He has used it also in an older league called the CFA to quite some success. I think Linoon is definitely a nice pickup. I think other than that, his team is quite solid. I don't know about Serena. It might be a little bit too passive for his team. We'll have to see about that. I think other than that, he has great speed tiers, which not many teams have. And that's also one of the reasons that he is so high up, because his speed tiers are really solid. His rockers might not be the best in Gigalith and Nidoking, but it might just be just enough. I don't know. Overall, really offensive on both sides. Really a lot of setup, which apes really like. Salamence, Big Threat, Mega Scissor, Rift, Swords Dance, pretty much also really great cleaner. And just some other ones that you might not expect can also just set up and win games. And I think overall a pretty solid offensive team. The only downside then when you have an offensive team is that you might not have the best resist to certain typings, like Coco and Tapu Koko and Sneasel are your only dark resist. Coco and Mega Sizzle are your only dragon resist, while Sizzle is quite weak to fire. Those things can be a little bit concerning. The same that Nidoking is your only rock resist. But I think with the offense Apes team has, he can definitely play around those certain type weaknesses, and he can definitely come out on top. And that's why he was in the top 3 for me. And now you will mention your number 4, which actually I'm quite interested in, because I had the Persians at number 15, but you have him at number 4. So just fire away.
Okay, so I'm going to put it out here right now. The vast majority of viewers will probably agree with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
On paper, this team, in terms of common weakness and sort of versatility, isn't great. But I've done something a bit interesting here and thought of Top Tier Boy as a player.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, in terms of Rob, Top Tier Boy has a Smogon background. Now look at the mons he's drafted. Mew, Garchomp, Tangrowth, Keldeo, Bishop. What do you notice about all of those mons? Extremely prevalent in the OU format. Yeah. This season in Gen 7, Phalop, Mega Swampert, extremely prevalent in the OU format. I see what Top Tier Boy has done here. He's picked a team he's comfortable with, and that's a massive threat to him, aspect to him. Tangrowth's already good. Tangrowth and Mew as a core together, especially in Smogon games, really synergize as well because of the spreads that you can run with them. One, makes it really hard to calc what spreads they're in or what items they're using. 2, they form as an excellent glue for a strategy that you're going to use. So Tangrowth Rain is very common, which is really interesting. And the things that usually break down Rain in OU in draft, not every team has access to those. I know Rain doesn't have a very great record in the NPL, but I think Top Tier Boy could be doing something here as well, especially with the ground spam and the water spam that Mega Swampert has. Again, I'm not a great fan of Galvantula, but the webs are a great backup plan just in case. The lead sash webs are there with great potential defog blockers. There is a great backup sort of caveat to instead of the Rain sweeping. So although it's not the most versatile team, I think in terms of Smogon and his experience as a player, Top Tier Boy has done something quite intelligent here, because people might just overlook his team and think, oh, it doesn't synergize that well. It's slightly easy to prep for. And then he brings standard Smogon, that does the job, because who says it might not? Articuno is a bit interesting. I'm not sure how it fits in there. I think that's the sort of a pickup he has an actual plan for, because nobody drafts Articuno as a defogger because it's just not good as a defogger. So he must have some specific reason for wanting Articuno. So we don't know yet, but it's got 2 very good offensive typings. Grand Ball is an underrated fairy that doesn't get enough love. Although it finds it hard to balance its defensive, it does hit very hard. And then Pelipper again, okay, it doesn't take a special hit very well, but Scarf Pelipper is very good. It allows for Hurricane spam. And I mean, you did mention the fact it hasn't got a lot of spam typing. I think he does need a fire type somewhere down the line. I think the Articuno could easily have been a Moltres and it would have worked just as well. But with a Rain team, you are going to double typings and you are going to pick up more than the same. So I think that's to be expected, and that's just the risk you take when drafting a Rain team. But I think the fact that he will have eminent amount of experience with these mons, and the fact that he will know how all of these mons are checked and countered, gives him an aspect of prep which will step him up a level than the others. And I've thought about this a lot more practically than on paper in terms of Top Tier Boy especially, which I think some people in the viewership won't like. But feel free to disagree with me. Feel free to tell me I'm wrong. I'll happily read it in the comments. But I think Top Tier Boy could surprise people with the fact that it's a team that he's very useful, and he knows a lot about all the mons that he's drafted.
Yeah, I think it's definitely cool to see your take on it. I think it's definitely really different from what from my opinion, and also how I went to about his team. I think we just have to see how the first few weeks will turn out, and if he indeed has so much experience already in the community, because his Smogon background with all those mons, he might just use them really well, and the synergy might just flow from there. I don't know. I think we just have to see how his team will perform. So for me at number 4, I had the Phoenix Sunkern, the better Phoenix team. And what I really liked about Cheese team was, like, yes, he does not have any Gen 7 mons, and that probably has a reason, but I first this team was not that great to me. Like I was thinking, okay, where's the speed come? Where does the speed come? But then he picked up that Raikou, that Swallow, and those really make up for his speed. He still has a bit of speed gap, like between 80 and 100 and such, which is a little bit concerning. But overall, I really love a lot of those mons on his team. It's a team actually quite close to my heart. It looks very well balanced with Sylvian has really a nice wish passer for his team. And I think Z Menfi is actually really great. And that's not because Z Rain Dance. I think everybody was like, oh, Z Rain Dance Menfi might be broken. Most likely you won't run that much because with Z Rain Dance you only have 2 coverage options, mostly 1-3. But I think Z Menfi, just when you use like Sub-Zero Slammer or Hydro Vortex, after a Tail Glow you pretty much get any Oko on pretty much any mon, and without a Tail Glow you can still hit quite hard and might just break a mon that you normally won't do that much damage to due to that Z move. And also you have some other Z moves like Z Heal Belt that will just be like a full restore for you, which is really nice if you use Menfi in a more defensive role. And that's why I really am a fan of Z Menfi. Well, Z Heatran with Z Sunny Day, Z Solar Beam might also be solved. I think Menfi is definitely a bit better for his team. I think other than that, his team is pretty nice. Mega Titar is not that proven in the community, but I think some people have used it well, like Mio and Miners Coach has in the past season of the CPC. It can definitely be a cool mon. It's like it does Dragon Dance better than normal Titar. Other than that, it's not that much better than normal Titar. I think other than that, his team is just pretty solid and just a lot of nice win cons actually with this Raikou and Swallow at the base, and then Menfi can also just be a win con if you preserve it enough. Sandrush Stoutland is really scary Stoutland. Most likely if you have only a ghost type to try to check normal types, Stoutland will just crunch its way through. And just his team it's quite solid, and it does not stand out that much maybe, but I think he really paired it up really well. And if he uses this team like I think he can use, I think he will definitely really have a solid season.
That's completely fair enough. I do see that as well. But next up we jump into, is it the top 3?
Yeah.
We are in the top 3 now. Now number 3, I mentioned the other Tampa Bay team that I haven't mentioned yet, or you've mentioned both. I'm getting to Mono now. And my first thought of Mono's team is it's nice to see he hasn't drafted Snorlax or Roserade or any of the mons he usually drafts. Like when I usually think of Mono, I think Snorlax, Roserade. I mean, he got Reuniclus, so that's his like there's his usual mon. But let's talk about the team he's actually got. I like Mega Lopunny. Obviously, it's just it's a guaranteed threat. It's a guaranteed 20 kills if you use it right. It's a guaranteed 15 kills if you use it wrong. Like that's how good a mon Mega Lopunny is. Although Pokemon, like now the format's evolved, so Mega Lopunny is a lot more checkable than it used to be because people have understood how to sort of get around it. But he's got a nice little Mimikyu in the back. Now Mega Lopunny Mimikyu is actually a really nice spam core because Mimikyu will get you a 3+2 and a hit, or a free 2 hits if you really want it to, because of how reasonably fast it is, plus the fact it gets access to priority and fairy. So that's nice. With the Mega Lopunny, the fighting and the fighting and the normal spam, a little bit with player off spam as well, is really cool. Reuniclus is there for solid setup, but also could be a nice little wall, a life orb sweeper, or an assault vest user. That's how good Reuniclus is. Haxorus is there for great setup. I like Scyther. I do like Scyther. I've used it before. Again, shout out to the second time for Shroom Raver who popularized the usage of Scyther. But Scyther is quite cool in the sense that it's got a decent speed tier. It hits pretty hard with a band, or even without a band, it gets SD as well. So that's really nice. Toxapex I'm not really sure about in the format still. It's not worth trading it for an Empoleon, but that's not the issue. I think that it's just a little bit slow and doesn't hit that hard. It's quite bulky and T-spikes are nice, and I think I trust Mono to use it because it's very much a mon that I feel like he'll be comfortable with. T-Tar is great, and so is Gliscor. They cover each other really well. I think Pharaoh is a bit redundant on his team. I think he could have picked a better steel type to sort of support his team well, but he got a really good rock resist out of it. So then again, it sort of balances it out. And I think Manectric has great coverage for a 3-point electric type mon. Again, I do see your fact that his speed isn't great. And if I'm right in saying he also needs a fire type. I mean, fire type isn't necessary, but I mean, usually you let your dragon type cover your fire type. have fire type coverage, but when you got Haxorus, it doesn't really have a fire type coverage. So I think he sort of might have needed that, and that might have made his team a little bit better. But I do enjoy it, and it's a team I would pick up because I think it's quite well balanced, and it's reasonably hard to prep for with the right amount of bulk, but also some good speed and some good setup in the right amount of places.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's funny that you mentioned that you didn't saw some standard mono mons. Well, I think quite a lot of mons actually are from his PPL championship run when he was in D2. He used pretty much, I think, Titar, Ferrothorn and Megalopony for sure. So I think it's still a mons all he's quite comfortable with. But we will just now move on to our top 2 actually. And there's just one team that you will see in both our top 2s. And for me it's number 2. For you it's even a top team already. And that's the Sydney Sharpedos, coached by Gypsy King, our current champion for the last 2 seasons. So yeah, I couldn't just get Gypsy again the number 1 spot immediately. He has to work for it for sure. No, but all fair enough. Gypsy's team again. He knows how to draft. He has proven himself the last few seasons, and he always has really solid drafts. And I think this draft is it's a solid draft. It's a bit more offensive actually than he normally drafts, but still it has a lot of bulk to back it up. There's some nice bulky pivots. There's some underrated lower tier mons, and I think it's really nice actually. Also, Gothitelle was quite a nice pickup. Just trapping mons with Gothitelle can just be really key if you can just remove one big threat for one of his other mons. Like maybe the opponent has one mon that can take some hits from Megadiense, he can just remove it with Gothitelle, and then Megadiense has free reign. And also it forces a lot of prep actually. Shed shells, if that normally a mon would run like a berry or leftovers, now it has to run shed shell because otherwise it will be trapped to Gothitelle. I think that was a solid pickup. One of the few things that's quite concerning me actually is the fact that his team is quite slow. He only has Megadiense at 110 and the rest is 89 or below. The speed tiers below 100 are pretty solid, but just above 100 there is just not much. He has quite a lot of setup to patch that up actually with Celesteela and Landorus, which have Rock Polish and Autotomize respectively, which can boost up their speed and become speedy in that way. And like mons like Hydreigon you can just slap on the Scarf, but still that raw speed actually helps a lot of teams and he lacks it, and that might hurt him a little bit. Also he does not have an electric type, which is normally quite nice for pivoting, but I think other than that his team is really solid. He has some great rockers, then Quillfish as spike for spikes and T-spikes, which is quite nice. Then if you look at his hazard removal, that's also a little bit concerning. I think the Sidgewise is only hazard removal, but then again he has no rock weaknesses at all actually. So with no rock weaknesses at all, he probably doesn't need to remove hazards as much. But I also have drafted in the past season of the CPC a team that has no rock weakness. You still want to remove hazards actually, especially if you have some grounded mons and the opponent has some spikes, T-spikes options. So the Sidgewise might not be your best hazard removal, but I think it still is good, but he might want a secondary hazard removal, I don't know. Other than that, great team, great special hit mons, great physical mons, a lot of win cons, especially his first 2 mons in Landorus D, which is an amazing Zmon also, with Tectonic Rage and the Supersonic Sky Strike. Celesteela always a pain to take down, and if it's not a pain to take down, it will just go with an Autotomize set and it might just clean up late game. So a really scary team to prep for sure, because you might be pressured before you know it. And I think that's pretty much all I have to say about his team. Just really solid, just a few nitpicks that make his team at number 2, which are mainly the speed and mainly the hazard removal. I think other than that his team is really, really solid again.
I'll talk about Gypsy when we get to number 1.
Yeah, for sure.
But at number 2, I have my guy Togovar. Now Togovar always seems to manage to draft a team that has an emotional connection with me. The man knows how to play with my heartstrings. Mega Warwell, Latios, I commend you. That is a Fairy Dragon Steel Core. That is a Fairy Dragon Steel Core and a half. Like the offensive presence of that Fairy Dragon Steel Core is enough to scare any team. And then you support that with the Trick Room support and a great spin-out and a load of Marowak plus Diggersby. I just think that if I had to pick up a team and use it, I'd use this. Um, Alola Muck is a really underrated, but it started off being underrated. Now it's pretty much a staple pick up in draft format. I don't know how it lasted that long in the draft. I think that's around 8. But Alola Muck is a great pickup because of what it can do to support a team. Omastar, I think, will do bits. I think Omastar will get 6 kills at least to prove its points value. The weak armor, the booster weak armor is really useful on Omastar, and I think it's slightly better than Kabutops because it can be run both physically and specially, whereas Kabutops is just slightly better on the physical side. Bit of in the cut, Rotom C. Again, as a grass type, I don't think it's amazing, but I mean, a volt switching grass type with a spammable move like Leaf Storm is always good. It has a good defensive set, and as Will-O-Wisp and Trick supports, that's always nice as well. And then he's got his Trick Room core in Slowbro and Porygon 2, which support the team, where he's got the nice bit of speed in Latios and 20. He has the nice bit of slow in Alola Marowak and Slowbro, which people forget Slowbro hits really hard. People think it just sits there and takes hit. It can Toxic School. It has pretty good coverage. Slowbro gets Flamethrower. And it can also Toxic School and do things like that, so that's always nice as well. Diggersby, there's no Mon that can switch into one of it. Diggersby's coverage means that no one single one Mon can switch into it, technically. Although it has 4 move slot Swindome, it has a move to hit every single one. No Ghost types, it's got Knockoff. No Steel types, it's got Fire Punch and Earthquake. I mean, it's got Wild Charge for Celesteela. Like, there's no Mon that can switch into Diggersby, technically. It has to be supported with a multiple amount of Mons, which is really good. Mega Mormile under Trick Room is going to be a threat. You mentioned Z Memento into Mega Mormile could be just broken. If he gets a Sword Stance up, Sucker Punch is going to be running through teams. So I'm really excited to see what Togebar is doing this season. I picked him on my bet for winnings last season, and I can see him doing very much the same this season. So I'm excited for Togebar this season, and hopefully I'm a bit biased because I am a Portland Timbers fan. Hopefully Togebar does very well there. But I'm not biased in terms of ranking. Like, I genuinely think this team is the second best team that has been drafted, purely because it has a clear goal. It's done it very well. It has its roles filled. The only weakness is Hazards. He's got 2 rock setters that are sort of reliable, but sort of not reliable at all. Sort of not that reliable. I mean, and then he hasn't got any spikers or toxic spikers, so that could be a bit interesting. But that's the only weakness I see with that team. Oh, he has Diggersby. That's a spiker, but otherwise he doesn't have anything else.
Yeah.
Thought I'd correct that.
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely see why you have it number 2. I also rated it in like top 5. It's definitely a really scary team to face. So we will now be going over our number 1s. And for me, actually, number 1 is the Toronto Staraptors, goes by Jolt. So you mentioned it at number 7, and you said that when you just look at it on paper, he has all the roles fulfilled, and you think in practicality it might not work out that well. And that's like, I think, where we differ. I saw that on paper can do really well, and I think still in practice, Jolt will really work well with this team. I think Mega Houndoom, he drafted well around it. He's even said it himself. He wanted some speedy sunny day users that could try to help Mega Houndoom like clean a game, and I think it's really solid. And I think the Mega Houndoom, Terrakion, Raichu is really scary to prep for. Pair it up with like a mon like Superior in the back. I think it will be pretty hard to cover all those mons in a defensive fashion. He has his speed stats covered, like it's one of the few teams that has a really great speed tiers with like 4 solid mons above 100 speed, and then Crowbit at 130. He has 3 reliable rockers in Jirachi, Swampert and Terrakion. He has Kovac for the Toxic Spikes. Then yes, Crowbit is his only removal, but still Crowbit is quite a nice hazard removal, and I think with his team he does not need to remove hazards that badly. Other than that, he has some great knockoff spam with a mon like Zangoose. Also, Kovac gets a knockoff. Houndoom might, I don't know for sure.
It doesn't, I don't think.
Okay, but it does get Pursuit, so he has a Pursuit Trapper in that, and also Zangoose. So he also got that covered. He has some nice physical powers, mainly the Terrakion, which is also a C user. It will probably break pretty much any team. Zangoose is also really scary. It also helps him a little bit with his little bit of Toxic Spike weakness he has going on. And then especially Mega Houndoom and Superior are mainly there And just some weeks he might run like offensive Gudra or just nasty plot or Calm Mind go for Grievous if he is allowed to. Like there are teams that does not have like a ghost or a normal type, or you can just run like Hidden Power Fighting if they have like only like a Sneasel or something, and they can really go to town. So overall I think he has some really solid options both offensively and just defensively as pivots. And just he has some great win cons, mostly the ones I already mentioned. A nice Volton core with the Jirachi, the Crobat and the Rotom Wash. And then the only thing that might be a little bit concerning is if you look at some of the typings, he might be a little bit weak to ground types, but still Crobat, Rotom Wash Superior, all those three combined are pretty solid. I think the only thing that could break it is mainly like Mold Breaker or 1000 Arrows, because that bypasses Rotom, which means Surp is like your only way of dealing with it quite reliably. So yes, Centrish Drill or like Zygarde might be a little bit concerning, but I think Joel definitely knows this and definitely can play around this with maybe like his bulky Swampert or something, you don't know. And other than that, his team is just really solid, and he just drafted everything he needed to draft on a draft league team. And definitely if you want to learn something about drafting a solid team, just talk to Jolt about it, because he definitely has the methods, and he also made some videos on it on the channel. So yeah, that's pretty much my take on Jolt's team, and I definitely am thinking it will still work out in practice as it does on paper.
I think I've just picked on one thing as well. Throughout these teams we've been going, this team dies to rock, this team doesn't switch into fire, this team dies to rock. If you look at his two main sweepers, you got a rock type and you got a fire type. So that actually might be one thing I've slightly overlooked in terms of Jolt's team, that the breaking potential of the fire and the rock type is actually really nice. I've only just noticed that. So that's a little redeeming factor for Jolt's team that I thought I apologize with. But now let's go on to my number one. Phalop's just playing hard to get, Gypsy. I'm the easy one. I've already ranked you at number one, which you've kind of ruined it for me already. Like you've already got me at number one, so you've got nothing to really amount to. But hopefully you'll still just stay consistent. See how consistent you can stay. I really like the Lando Therian and Celesteela core / Mega Diancie. Like that core offensively is just ridiculous, as well as defensive. Like he's got one of the only cores that can be run offensively and defensively. Like in my eyes, that's ridiculous. Like even Hydreigon can be run as a defensive dragon. So like that's like the versatility within that is ridiculous, and it's something that I don't think I've seen done before. Like, I don't think I've seen those four mons paired together before. So I think that Gypsy uniqueness is really nice. Also, what I've spotted is Toxic Spikes with Quillfish plus Gothitelle could be really interesting. I think Gypsy with Gothitelle is a menace, because Gypsy is a sort of man who will know when to use Gothitelle. Gothitelle isn't an instantly broken mon just by having it. There are mons that are broken just by you having it. Like it's not one of those. Like if you had a Genesect in League format, no matter how bad a player you are, you're going to get kills with it because it is instantly broken. Gothitelle's not one of those mons. You have to know how and when to use it to be effective, and I think Gypsy plays exactly the right way in that Gothitelle will do its thing. With Quillfish there to set up hazards, Hariyama is one of the most underrated fighting types in the game. I think it's actually really good in League format, and it's really been popularized by people like, I think Onesie Burnett is a very big Hariyama advocate, and I think that it's quite an underrated one. Piloswine is a threat. People forget it's got 100 attack, as well as the fact it's going to be bulky as shit. So you can invest in attack as well as that. I like Hydreigon because of its versatility and U-turn potential. The only problem is I don't see an electric type, so there's no Volt Tone core, which kind of sucks. I think he could have spent the 3 points on Audino on an electric type, because I don't really see what Audino's doing there. Okay, it's a cleric, but I mean, I think there was points better spent in perhaps he could have brought Stunfisk back. I'm not going to lie. Stunfisk, like if he brought Stunfisk back, I think that would have been really nice. But I don't really have a problem with this, like much. That's the only problem I can sort of nitpick with this team, because I know for a fact Gypsy will spin this team so that either Gothitelle is going to be a main threat for a week, or his like offensive / defensive core is going to be there. He's also got Decidueye. I'm going to throw this out there. My favorite Decidueye set is Weakness Policy, Baton Pass. So you might see that. You never know. Weakness Policy, Baton Pass into Mega Diancie could just murder everyone. So you just don't know. The only problem, my only problem with the team is there's no electric type, and I don't really see what Audino is doing. But you never know what Audino could do. He could prove me wrong. He could get a 6-0 in week 1, or you don't know. But the important thing to say at the end of these power rankings is, remember, this is just our opinion. This is why each one of our power rankings didn't match up. It's purely opinion based. We want to hear your opinions, so make sure you stick them in the comments below. And if you do disagree with us, coaches or viewers, make sure you tell us as well, because we're not going to get offended, and it's just an opinion based format, and we want to know what we said that was right. And if Houndu gets knocked off, please slate me in the comments, because that's my fault. But if you want to close off, Phalop, if you've got anything to say.
Yeah, definitely. Turbo already mentioned it. Just feel free to hit us up. We are always in for discussion. Please don't try to talk behind our backs. We don't like it to hear it from other people. Just talk to us directly. You can murder us in the comment section, or just through PMs. I don't mind, but don't do it behind our backs. That's just the one thing I don't really like. Other than that, definitely check out all the coaches. I believe I think they will go up like 2 days after this ranking will go up, which is most likely, I think, Sunday the 16th will be the day when all the coaches will upload their week 1 matches, and there definitely will be some hype matches going on. I think I don't want to drag out too long, but I think the main thing is the clash of the Phoenix teams already in week 1, and also the clash of the Bayern Munich versus the Reggie Giants, which was last season's GPC finals. I think those two are really some matches that you have to consider. And I also believe that it was an NPL minor finals rematch between Rob and Mono. So those 3 matches are really hyped already. So definitely check out all the coaches, check out all the links which will be in the section below the video, of all our coaches, all our analysts, and all the people also who work on the GFX, which I think most of the GFX that is done from the power rankings is either Fry's work or Bill's work. So definitely also a shout out to them. And I think with that we will round off this power rankings, which is going on for almost 2 hours. So I hope you bear with us. Mostly those power rankings will be around 45 minutes to an hour when we do them normally, but because we like to talk about the drafts a little bit more extensively, it went on a little bit too long. So if you have any closing remarks, Turbo?
Yeah, no, just that. Sorry for the 2 hours. Sorry for the 2 hours of pain. I've almost died, as you can hear by my voice. But I'm going to close out here and say Turbo out.
So bye everybody, and we will be back next week. Later.